Now, this is going to be a boring video because people asked me to talk about boring stuff. I actually got commissioned through my Subscribestar. Why aren't you signed up there yet? In order to talk about voting. And I assume the person that wanted me to talk about voting, they expected me to say one of the two cliches, which is either voting doesn't matter, so don't bother. The other cliche is that everybody should vote. We should make it like in certain countries like Greece, I believe, where it is mandatory. So put a fine on the person that doesn't go to vote. I reject both of these opinions. I think they're by retards for retarded people. And I will give you wisdom now. This is what I've noticed after talking about politics for the last 10 years. The reason most people do not believe in voting is due to the fact that most people organize in groups in real life. And they notice something interesting. They notice that usually when the leader of a group changes, the whole dynamic of the group changes as well. Like very rarely does the group remain the same, especially if a person with a completely different ideology and view changes leadership, right? But when we look at nation states, what do we notice? Well, we notice that across the Western world, states are very stable. Rarely do you have like a party winning and then you get sweeping reforms. Rarely do you have like someone winning and then the entire international policy changes. And so people are legitimately wondering, is like, well, does voting actually matter? And why is this happening? Now, the reality is that there are certain nations where you do have sweeping reforms, like when Javier Milei won. But you also have like nations where some changes can happen. And then you have nations where changes doesn't happen at all. So what we can conclude that in some nations, democracy genuinely works. In most nations, however, like let's say you have a country that has an environmentalist agenda, but like people that are against environmentalism actually manage to win. What you will see is not that the environmentalist policies are necessarily rolled back. No, what you will see is that there's going to be very little pro-environmentalist legislation moving forward, and some of the things that have passed may be rolled back a little, right? And this is true for most countries. And then you have nations that democracy is more like giving people the illusion to vote. I'm sorry to say this, but I think the UK is one of them. I mean, you get Liz Truss, and look what happened with her, and you get people that are appointed as prime minister. No. And then the difference between Labour and the Tories, I'm yet to be persuaded, all right? So why is this happening? What exactly is the system behind this? And the answer is bureaucracy. Like most modern countries in the world right now, they operate on bureaucracy. So you have like people that aren't appointed, they're not voted by anyone, but they are the ones that actually write the legislation. They are the ones that actually consider the direction of the nation. And there's a group of interests. NGOs, for instance, in most nations hold quite significant level of power. Some of them even manage to get the government to give them money, right? So the government takes taxes from the people, then they pay the NGOs, and then the NGOs use the funding in order to push for lobbying and push for changes in legislation. You have corporate interests. You have international communities. So like the European Union, for instance, can pressure politicians in Eastern Europe, and they say, apply what we tell you, or vote the way we tell you, or else there's sanctions. Right? So like all of these things, they're working together in a bizarre mechanism in order to actually create internal policy. So you understand that nations, with some exceptions, like maybe China and the United States, but even they, in general, nations aren't solitary sovereign states. They are intertwined in an international community. They are dependent on agreements, on other nations influencing or pressuring them. And then you have like the internal mechanisms, which is usually like done by an army of bureaucrats and people that are the ones making the legislations. And so the question comes, is like, what is the role of a politician? And the answer is like the role of a politician in modern day is to be an actor. They go in front of a camera. They're going to have usually a prompter where they read a speech. They answer a couple of questions from the media, which may or may not even be something that was pre-planned. and then they fuck off. And they get paid a lot of money for doing it. Like, the role of the politician is actually to get a cushy job. If you look at a politician in the EU, they're making around 10,000 euros a month, right? So even if you have a person that genuinely wants change, that genuinely wants reform, and they go into the European Union, the very moment that you get like 10,000 euros a month, that's like shattering, right? And you're surrounding yourself by other elitists. Like, you completely disconnect yourself from the people, and you're surrounded by elitists. Your mindset will change. This is what happened with AOC, by the way. Like, if you look at her rhetoric, if you look at the stuff she was saying, I'm not an AOC fan, but like, she was a leftist populist, and now she's an elitist. Why? Because like, the moment the money comes kicking in, the moment you surround yourself with donors and lobbyists, like, those are the people that genuinely start to matter. The public doesn't matter as much, right? But the reality is, as I mentioned before, these people make a lot of money, so they want to keep making money. Like, you can listen to the lobbyists and you can listen to the NGOs, but at the end of the day, you still want to get voted into office, because otherwise the gravy train stops. And so the people in power, they're not interested in fixing the problems. What they are interested in, however, is to manage the public opinion. Like, everything that happens in a country is about managing public opinion. This is why the EU spends billions of euros in order to promote propaganda, to say that the European Union is the one that keeps Europe together. Like, false. NATO keeps Europe together. The idea that without the EU, Europe will go to war. Like, false. NATO keeps Europe from going to war. The idea that Europe is the only thing that can allow free travel into Europe, like, false. No, like, nation states can allow travel. But the reason it does this, again, is to manage public opinion. Because if the public starts voting for sovereign, what do they call it? Far-right, Nazis, bigots, blah, 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 it removes the individuals from power from getting the gravy train. Like, someone is losing their 10,000 euros a month and their seat in Brussels in exchange for some twat coming from Romania to take his seat, right? So they're interested in maintaining public power, interested in maintaining appearance. Now, the problem is, like, at some point in any nation, usually the government is interested in bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is interested in the process rather than the results, right? So, like, as long as the process is maintained, and as long as they create like more seats for their friends and families to get cushy government jobs from the taxpayer money, then everything is fine. However, you reach a point where the life of the average person starts going to shit. You get inflation, you get unemployment, you get cultural friction, you get crime. And so you put the propaganda machine into overdrive. Like, they start talking on TV. It's like, oh, this is hateful to say that. Don't talk about this. Let's change the name. It's not criminal. It's a person brushing with the justice system. You know, like shit like that. And they're managing public opinion, hopefully that they can make some changes, some small reforms so that the public can shut the fuck up. If the public doesn't shut the fuck up, and if the public definitely starts voting massively, right? It's not like a symbolic vote. It's not like a small victory, but like genuinely the public resists the propaganda. You get a Milei, you get a Trump, you get someone that actually goes in there in order to do reform. But like, again, you need to understand it's the resisting of the propaganda that's the issue, because like a lot of people, when they think about modern societies, they think like an us versus them, right? Like the government versus the people. No, it's not like that. It's the government plus the people against some people. So in other words, like you even during the BLM riots, right? And you have like people on the streets causing chaos and destruction. The reason it's allowed is because a significant chunk, a significant percentage of the Americans were justifying that. It's not that they were justifying, they were on the side of that, right? So it's not just the government that's saying, oh, let's keep the police forces back. It's also the people on the ground that demand it's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? Like, and you have like corporations and you got shit like that. And so the question happens, like, what do you get when you have a Trump, right? And the answer is, well, nothing, because like most of the system, the bureaucracy, is designed accounting that every now and then you have a wild card. Every now and then, like, someone wins elections that they shouldn't. Every now and then, the public is going to push an opinion that goes against what the government wants. Perfect example. The United States has interests in the Middle East, right? Like, it wants to bomb the Middle East. But now public opinion is shifting. And public opinion says that, no, we're into social justice now, like brown people are oppressed, colonialism bad. What does the US government do? It co-opts that opinion, and now they're using drones painted in rainbow flags with the Black Lives Matter power fist, and they're still bombing the Middle East. But they're doing it progressively. So, the government, again, they have PR teams and PR specialists that are already trained. Like they already know how they will handle the next crisis that comes up. They already predicted, like they even know, they have analysts that tell them, it's like, okay, if we push for this environmentalist policy, eventually we're going to have farmers protesting. What do we do when that happens? Like they don't wait for the protest to happen and they go pick at your face. They already know it will happen. And they already know what they're going to do about it. It's like, okay, we're going to push for maximum damage with this environmentalist law. The protesters come, we let them protest for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then we scale it back to this point. Everything is pre-planned. Like this is the thing. Like, a lot of people assume that the government is stupid. No, it's not stupid. It's maleficent. Like it views its own interests on top of the citizens. For most politicians, they don't even look at the average person as a human being. They see it as a statistic. What they care about is their backers, their donors, the NGOs, the people that can damage them, their political opponents. That's what they care about. The average citizen is a percentage. They don't even know you fucking exist, right? So, when you have someone like Trump, again, the system accounts for it. They know how to maneuver around the person. They know how to try and accommodate the inconvenience. So what happened with Trump? Well, massive negative propaganda. Don't let him pass almost anything he wants. People in the Republican Party, let's see if we can reach them. Send some of our donors so that, on the important legislation, they don't vote like him. So on and so forth. And so the question is, like, is it important to vote? The thing that governments do the best, besides warfare, is managing public opinion. There's a lot of money and a lot of resources spent into crafting narratives. And when you have someone like Trump, the damage that he does the most is collapsing the narrative. The simple fact that he is now having a world stage and the cameras are on him, and he can talk about things that politicians would rather people not talk about, that is the most damaging thing ever. Because by shaping public opinion, it creates chaos for the governments. It influences their backers, their donors, right? Which come from the private sector. And now if people's shopping habits change, they get affected and they start to panic. They start to suffer. For instance, the Bud Light boycott. I mean, that damaged them tremendously. It wasn't the fact that, Bud Light as a company is affected. It was like, what if we're next? And then they see that there's other companies and it's not a one-off. So like they're freaking out, right? Like the entire system is now placed into panic mode. They're trying to figure out, okay, this is something that we didn't expect. Like let's start. So they're focusing on that shit, which means they have less resources to focus on preventing something else from happening, like a Trump presidency. And again, when you have someone in office that is a populist, the elitists have a much more difficult time in enacting change. So it at least slows it down. And if by some miracle you get another populist afterwards, then you may even start to notice that not only like that the stuff gets slowed down, but like stuff now starts to turn back. But to answer the question, like, how can you change the system? The way I view it is that this is a cycle, and it has happened throughout human history. This is not something new. As empires become prosperous, bureaucracy grows, and the empire becomes more bloated. As the bureaucracy grows, it's more difficult to roll stuff back. And so the only thing that can actually change the system is a hard reset, like something that shakes the system, whether it is a war, whether it is a plague, whether it is like an economic collapse, like something that like shakes the system to the core that is the only time when you hit the reset button and you gain prosperity again. The reality is, like, if governments wanted people to be prosperous, they could. Like, we have 2,000 years of knowledge. We actually know how to make prosperous nations. So if you're thinking about the idea that the government doesn't know or is incompetent, you're a moron. The reality is that most governments do not govern so that people are prosperous. They govern so that people are complacent, and they also govern so that the people at the top, the NGOs and the bureaucrats and all of those people, that they actually manage to have. It's not nearly about wealth. It's more about influence and prestige. And so once you notice that, you realize that the reason you don't really have now patriotic movements and sovereignty and, you know, like, respect for that is because that's not what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is to maintain the status quo, promote the neoliberal order, and they also care the most about the economy, the GDP. Like, that is the only important thing that they care about. Because if you run a multinational corporation that spans over different countries, like, you're not going to be loyal to a state. You're going to be loyal to your company, to your empire. And they care more about the GDP than they care about things like the traditional family, religion, right? Like, that's out of the picture. They don't care if their citizens are happy and they get to have many children. No, like, what they think is like, okay, well, if the citizens aren't going to have sex, we're just going to import like 5 million immigrants and we get cheap labor and there we go, right? So, like, that's their mindset. That's their way of thinking. And the thing is, like, it can either reach to a point where the economy is so fucked that people start voting significantly for a person like Javier Miles, right? The one in Argentina. There's the president of Salvador, right? Like, this happens out of desperation when the countries literally have no more option and they're voting. It's like, okay, literally anyone else but them. Or you can have a war like you had in World War I and World War II, which completely reshapes all the institutions, all the maps, everything. Or a plague. Like, if you have a massive plague, and I'm not talking about COVID, but like actual, you know, stocking the bodies type of Black Death level, that too usually changes things. Because if you have like a legit plague, then or a war, then the government actually has to become pragmatic. And they start cutting jobs, they start doing things differently, and it's very difficult to revert from that. It's very, like, it takes time to revert back into bureaucracy, because people accept small changes, but they wouldn't accept Weimar Republic overnight. Weimar Republic, another example, right? Like, the economy crashed completely, and you get authoritarians. By the way, the change is not always good. It's also important to bear. Like, just because you have a calamity doesn't necessarily mean that you have a good change. Look at the Arab Spring, for instance, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the new people in power are actually going to be caring about the citizens. And so that's my take. Like, should you go to vote? Well, the answer is yes. I think you should. But I also think that voting can also mean trolling. And, like, trolling is very important when you vote. Because, you know, choosing to stay home or nullifying your vote doesn't mean shit. Like, no one cares. But if you start voting the clown pill candidate, and they actually have a chance of winning, that inconveniences things. That inconveniences things a lot. Like, for instance, if I was an American, I would sign up for the Democrat Party and I would vote for Bernie Sanders. And the answer is why? Well, that's what voting for the clown pill means. It means voting for the people that they hate. They really don't like Bernie Sanders. They're not calling him fascist or Nazi or... No, they just don't like him. I don't know why they don't. I don't fucking care. They don't like him, I'll vote for him. And so if you vote for clown pill candidates, you destabilize the system, which means that the system is more worried about patching itself up rather than fucking you over. So, like, the more the government is focused on dealing with its internal issues and problems, the happier I am. And when I say the government, I don't mean the legislators. I mean the NGOs and everything like that. Like, if you get a new person like the Bernie Sanders that's shrewd and he already has money, so it costs more to bribe him. It's like, bribe, such a difficult word. In America, they call it lobbying, right? So yeah, it costs more to lobby him. It's more difficult. He's got like connections. Again, I don't know why they hate him. I just know they do. That's enough for me, Like, at the end of the day, I don't fucking care. Obviously, I want right-wingers to win, like people closer to my ideology. But if I don't have the opportunity, like, for instance, this election, like, Trump will win. Why don't you register as a Democrat and, you couldn't, right? Because it was Kamala Harris. But yeah, like, if I had the chance to vote in the Democrat primary, I would have voted for Kamala Harris. Why? Because they don't like her. Like, that is the mentality of how you vote smart. You just look at, okay, who is the one that causes the most ass hurt and who is the one that actually has a chance. And once you find that out, okay. I mean, there's no point in voting for Trump. He's going to win anyway, right? So if you see that your side is winning, why even bother? Register Democrat and vote in a way that, I mean, it's not illegal what I'm saying, right? It's not, and it makes sense. I don't think a lot of Americans think this way, though. Like, they probably don't understand what I'm saying. It's like, oh, V, how can I vote for blah, blah, blah? It's like, well, look, the system is designed to lie to you. So you need to behave in a way that is legal, honest, and you're still exercising your right. It's just you don't vote for who they expect. And look in Romania, someone they didn't expect ended up winning, and now they're panicking, and it's like new elections. So now the parties need to spend more money. And they need to expend more resources, and they're in panic mode. I think like all the voters that voted for that are happy with the results. They're like, yeah, no, good, okay. And this is, because the government refuses to address the citizen concerns, and it's because they keep doing the managing of the public opinion. Sure, they can manage the public opinion, but the public doesn't mean that it's not resentful. Like, you can tell the public, hey, the economy is great. But when the public goes to the gas station and they find out it's not so great, then they hate you. Because they know you lied to them. It's like, in what fucking world are you living? Where you tell the public that, if you're against the EU, you're with the Russians. It's like, okay, I mean,